Ow! That works good.
In 1994, the Farrelly brothers created something magical, show-stopping, and extremely hilarious. Starring comedy icons like Jim Carrey, Dumb and Dumber took the box office by storm and became a hit. But the movie is not even as interesting as the behind-the-scenes episodes. Join us. Let's find out some weird facts you didn't know about Dumb and Dumber. Number 20. Jeff Daniels was told he'd ruin his career if he took the role. Jeff Daniels, who played the role of Harry Dunn, was warned by nearly everyone in his professional circle not to do it. His agents, managers, and even close industry friends were convinced that if he took the role in Dumb and Dumber, it could permanently damage his reputation as a serious actor. This is because in the early 90s, Daniels was widely respected for his dramatic and intelligent roles. He was seen as a thoughtful actor, not someone you'd expect to see defecating loudly in a broken toilet or lighting his leg on fire during a snowball fight. Transitioning from emotionally intelligent roles to comedic roles seemed like a significant downgrade in the eyes of Hollywood gatekeepers. It wasn't just his agents who were skeptical. New Line Cinema, the studio producing Dumb and Dumber, also fought hard against casting Daniels. The studio later gave in reluctantly, having hedged their bets. They offered him $50,000 for the role, showing their lack of faith in him. This ridiculous amount was practically a slap in the face for someone of Daniels' experience and stature. Regardless of their lack of faith in him, Daniels committed himself 100% to the project. He gave his best to playing Harry Dunn, and his effort was seen in numbers and counts. Dumb and Dumber turned out to be a massive box office hit, grossing over $247 million worldwide on a $17 million budget. It became a cult classic, and Harry and Lloyd became two of the most beloved comedy duos in movie history. Number 19. Jim Carrey took a pay cut so Jeff Daniels could join the film. You may wonder why Jeff Daniels was later allowed to play the role, despite the studio's initial lack of faith in him. That is because Jim Carrey, a powerful and influential figure in Hollywood at the time, made some sacrifices on his behalf. After Carrey was officially cast as Lloyd Christmas, the studio began auditioning other actors to play Harry Dunn. However, Carrey had a different vision. He had watched Daniels work in dramas like The Purple Rose of Cairo and Gettysburg, and he believed that Daniels had a straight-faced sincerity that would elevate the film. So he insisted that Jeff Daniels was the right fit for Harry because he didn't want a second clown in the car. At this point, Carrey was just coming off a huge breakout year. He had starred in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which became a massive success and established him as a top box office draw. That film alone gave Carrey enough influence to start making demands, and he used that influence to fight for Daniels. It was reported that Carrey was willing to reduce his asking price so that the production would have sufficient budget to cast Daniels and pay him at least a fair wage. This is a rare sacrifice in Hollywood, especially when it involves someone at the peak of their newfound fame. Number 18. Jim Carrey was paid 140 times more than Jeff Daniels. One of the most lopsided salary stories in Hollywood history comes from the making of Dumb and Dumber in 1994. At the time, Jim Carrey was paid a whopping $7 million, while his co-star Jeff Daniels earned only $50,000, making Carrey's paycheck 140 times greater than Daniels. In the early 90s, Carrey was still an up-and-coming comedian, primarily known for his sketch work on the hit TV show In Living Color. He had not yet proven himself as a movie star. In early 1994, Carrey had a massive breakout success with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and became one of the hottest comedic actors in Hollywood. So when the Farrelly brothers, who were directing Dumb and Dumber, cast Carrey as Lloyd Christmas, the studio was eager to secure him even if it meant paying him millions. In contrast, Jeff Daniels was a seasoned dramatic actor and wasn't known for comedy, so the executives worried that he might not fit the tone of the outrageous script. The disparity in pay was extreme, reflecting how the industry evaluated actors at the time. Despite the enormous pay gap, Daniels has never publicly expressed resentment. He has consistently stated that he's glad he took the role. He saw it as a turning point and the opportunity he needed to show he could handle comedy as well as drama. Number 17. Jim Carrey had a gallbladder attack on set and kept filming anyway.
Put us down for 4,
in case we want seconds.
During the filming of Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey suffered a gallbladder attack, a condition that causes intense abdominal pain, often due to gallstones blocking the bile ducts. But rather than halting production, Carrey reportedly pushed through the pain and continued filming. On screen, Carrey's performance never skipped a beat. Some of the most outrageous scenes in the movie were filmed while Carrey was dealing with this very real medical issue. This episode has become a symbol of Carrey's extreme work ethic and commitment to performance. Eventually, Carrey did get medical attention. Not long after filming Wrapped, he underwent gallbladder surgery and the organ was removed. The actor has since joked about it in interviews, referencing the pain but downplaying the drama, as he often does with personal challenges. Carrey's gallbladder attack is one of those wild behind-the-scenes stories that most fans never hear about. Number 16. The film's most famous line, "So you're telling me there's a chance," was improvised.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
One of the most iconic statements from Dumb and Dumber is, "So you're telling me there's a chance." Surprisingly, this line is not even in the script. Jim Carrey, in his role as the hopelessly clueless Lloyd Christmas, delivered this line, and it has become one of the most quoted phrases in movie comedy history. What makes it even more legendary is that Carrey completely improvised it on the spot. Carrey made that statement during a painfully awkward but hilarious scene in which Lloyd finally confesses his feelings to Mary Swanson, the woman he's been chasing across the country. In an attempt to turn him down gently, Mary tells him the odds of them being together are more like 1 in a million. This was a polite rejection in a normal situation, but Lloyd, in his eternally optimistic and dim-witted way, lights up with hope and responds with the now famous line, "So you're telling me there's a chance." This response, which wasn't scripted, struck a perfect comedic tone that the crew immediately knew had to stay in the film. The directors Peter and Bobby Farrelly later praised Carrey for his ability to transform simple dialogue into comedic gold. Over the years, "So you're telling me there's a chance" has become a catchphrase, widely used in memes, sports commentary, dating jokes, and any scenario where the odds are laughably bad. Number 15. Jeff Daniels performed the infamous toilet scene without a stuntman. The toilet scene is inarguably the most talked about and hilarious moment in Dumb and Dumber. In it, Harry Dunn suffers a severe gastrointestinal meltdown in Mary Swanson's pristine Aspen home after his best friend Lloyd Christmas spikes his drink with an industrial-strength laxative. What many fans don't realize is that Daniels himself performed this awkward, squirmy, and explosive scene. He refused to use a stunt double because he prefers it raw and real. In the notorious sequence, Harry, feeling the sudden and violent effects of the laxative, rushes to the bathroom only to find himself in a horrific situation. He grunts, groans, and sweats profusely as he unleashes a deeply embarrassing wave of bowel agony. Though over-the-top sound effects were added in post-production, Daniels' performance, the facial expressions, body language, posture, and timing were 100% real. What makes the scene particularly memorable is that Daniels played it with complete sincerity. That contrast between the ridiculous situation and the actor's straight-faced commitment is what elevates the comedy. Director Peter Farrelly later praised Daniels for his fearlessness and professionalism. The scene required the kind of vulnerability and self-deprecation that few actors were willing to give, but Daniels never hesitated. Number 14. Mary Swanson's name is a joke. Lauren Holly played Mary Swanson, the elegant and kind-hearted woman whom Lloyd Christmas falls hopelessly in love with in Dumb and Dumber. But while most viewers might not give her name a second thought, there's a subtle and hilarious joke embedded right in it. The full joke unfolded in a scene where Lloyd is trying to remember Mary's last name. While muttering possibilities out loud to himself, he said, "Swanson? Samsonite? I was way off." This moment is more than just a funny line. Lloyd, who had only met Mary briefly when she left her briefcase at the airport, becomes obsessed with returning it to her. He sets off on a cross-country road trip with his best friend Harry, convinced she's his soulmate. But there's a little problem. He barely remembers anything about her, including her last name. As he tries to recall it, he looks at the name on the briefcase and reads, Samsonite, which is a real-life brand of luggage. In his blissfully ignorant mind, he assumes that must be her name. This line has become one of the most quoted from the movie. According to interviews with the Farrelly brothers, the name Swanson was chosen specifically because it sounds similar to Samsonite. It was meant to set up Lloyd's hilarious blunder, making the audience laugh at how confident he is in his wildly incorrect guess. This small, almost throwaway moment is a perfect snapshot of Dumb and Dumber's genius. Number 13. The most annoying sound in the world was improvised. Jim Carrey is a genius in improvisational skills, and that talent made one of the most iconic and unexpectedly hilarious moments in Dumb and Dumber. One of these moments was when his character Lloyd unleashes what he calls the most annoying sound in the world. The scene occurs during the road trip, when Lloyd and Harry pick up a hitchhiker named Joe Mentalino. What follows is a car ride that starts awkward and quickly becomes unbearable for poor Joe, who's a secret hitman hired to kill them. In the middle of the ride, Lloyd suddenly says to Joe, "Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?" Without waiting for a response, Carrey lets out a high-pitched, nasal, screeching wail that is disturbing, painful, hilarious, and unforgettable. Jeff Daniels joins in, adding to the absurdity of the moment. Joe's expression of sheer discomfort was inexplicably funny. According to behind-the-scenes commentary and interviews, the line and the sound were not in the original script. Director Peter Farrelly encouraged creative freedom among the cast, and Carrey took it personally. The scene works so well not just because of the absurd sound itself, but because of how naturally it fits the characters. Number 12. Jim Carrey's chipped tooth in Dumb and Dumber was real. He had his cap removed for the role. One of the most memorable physical traits of Jim Carrey's character, Lloyd Christmas, in Dumb and Dumber, is his chipped front tooth. Most people assumed it was a prosthetic or a clever makeup trick designed for the film, but the chipped tooth was 100% real. Carrey intentionally exposed it to make the character even funnier. Even before he became a global comedy icon, Carrey had chipped his tooth in his childhood days while playing on a rough playground that included a metal swing. Like many people with similar injuries, he had the tooth capped with dental bonding to give it a natural appearance. By the time he began acting in major films, his smile had returned to its normal appearance. However, when he was about to step into the role of the wildly eccentric and dim-witted Lloyd Christmas, Carrey made a drastic decision. He believed that Lloyd's appearance should reflect his quirky, offbeat personality, so he visited his dentist and asked him to remove the cap, revealing the jagged, natural chipped tooth underneath. He knew that a chipped tooth would help audiences immediately recognize Lloyd's childlike simplicity. The result worked brilliantly. Lloyd's chipped tooth became an instantly recognizable feature of the character and added to the film's visual absurdity. Every time Lloyd smiled, giggled, or delivered a ridiculous line, the tooth emphasized his blissfully unaware charm. What makes this even more remarkable is that Carrey wasn't afraid to make himself ugly for the sake of comedy. Number 11. The snow fight scene in Dumb and Dumber wasn't choreographed, it was raw acting. One of the funniest and most chaotic scenes in Dumb and Dumber takes place during a snowy day in Aspen, when Lloyd and Mary Swanson engage in what starts as a playful snowball fight. But the scene quickly took a hilarious and intense turn, when Lloyd threw an unexpectedly violent snowball straight into Mary's face. This scene wasn't staged, rehearsed, or choreographed, it was completely real. Jim Carrey genuinely threw that snowball at Lauren Holly's face very hard. In interviews, both Carrey and Holly have acknowledged that the snowball fight scene was filmed with very little direction. The scene starts sweetly, with Lloyd and Mary playfully tossing soft handfuls of snow. Then, without warning, Lloyd becomes visibly annoyed when Mary catches him off guard. He retaliates with a comically over-the-top attack, tackling her to the ground, shoving snow in her face, and then hurling a snowball like a missile. The moment was so intense that many fans believed it had to be carefully scripted or rehearsed with stunt doubles. But nope, it was just Carrey doing what he does best. Lauren Holly, to her credit, stayed in character and rolled with the punch, making the scene even more hilarious through her stunned reaction. The snowball fight stands out because it perfectly captures Dumb and Dumber's tone, and the fact that it wasn't scripted added to its authenticity and energy. Number 10. The hotel they filmed in had real guests, and they were annoyed during filming. Although the set of Dumb and Dumber was in Aspen, Colorado, much of it was filmed in Park City, Utah, including the famous scenes set in the luxury hotel where Harry and Lloyd check in after finding the suitcase full of money. This meant that while the cast and crew were shooting one of the most outrageous comedies of the decade, real hotel guests were staying there, and many of them were not happy about it. The production team had secured permission to film inside the hotel, but hadn't rented it out entirely. One of the biggest complaints from guests came during the filming of the gala scene when Jim Carrey strutted into the hotel lobby in that bright orange tuxedo. His over-the-top and loud delivery clashed with the refined, relaxed expectations of the hotel's upscale clientele. Many guests were reportedly visibly annoyed, complaining to hotel management about the constant disruption, particularly the noise. The production crew tried to be respectful and worked to limit the inconvenience, but the nature of comedy made it nearly impossible to avoid disturbances. Despite the inconvenience, the hotel itself became a sort of unsung character in the movie. Number 9. The Farrelly brothers wrote Dumb and Dumber in a small Los Angeles motel room. Before Dumb and Dumber became a 90s comedy classic, its origins were far from glamorous. In fact, the screenplay was written in a cramped, low-budget motel room by the film's future directors, Peter and Bobby Farrelly. Long before they were known, the Farrelly brothers were just two aspiring filmmakers with big dreams and barely any money to their name. In the early 1990s, the brothers were trying to break into Hollywood, but had no major writing credits, no powerful connections, and no steady income. To save money while working on their script, they rented out a cheap motel room in Los Angeles. The air conditioning barely worked. The environment was surrounded by noise. They had little comfort, yet they crafted one of the funniest screenplays of the decade. During the writing sessions, the Farrellys would sit for hours brainstorming ridiculous ideas and outrageous gags. At one point, Peter Farrelly joked that they were living like Harry and Lloyd while writing them, broke, hopeful, and a little out of their depth. But it was in that gritty environment that their creativity flourished. Eventually, after months of work, the script was finished and began making the rounds in Hollywood. Number 8. The tongue on the pole scene was inspired by a real urban legend. During a flashback scene meant to show just how dumb Lloyd and Harry have always been in Dumb and Dumber, a young Harry is seen sticking his tongue to a frozen metal pole on a cold winter's day. His tongue instantly sticks to the freezing metal, causing panic and discomfort, while Lloyd simply stares cluelessly and walks away. This scene wasn't just a comic invention, but rooted in one of America's most famous cold-weather urban legends. The legend suggests that if you place your tongue on a metal object in freezing temperatures, it will freeze to the surface and stick there. This idea has circulated for decades in American culture, especially among children. Surprisingly, this ideology is true. Metal is an excellent conductor of heat. When your warm, moist tongue touches a piece of frigid metal, it instantly draws heat away from the skin on your tongue. Since the moisture on your tongue helps the heat transfer even faster, the result is that the saliva freezes almost instantly, welding your tongue to the metal. The Farrelly brothers, known for blending slapstick humor with real-world absurdity, borrowed the idea and gave it a fresh, exaggerated twist. In Dumb and Dumber, the flashback exaggerates the scene's idiocy for laughs, but the core idea, which is the frozen tongue myth, stays rooted in reality. Number 7. The suitcase full of money was originally a MacGuffin. Do you remember the mysterious black suitcase that Mary Swanson leaves behind at the airport in Dumb and Dumber? Lloyd Christmas, in his usual goofy optimism, believes she simply forgot it. With the heart of a romantic and the mind of a daydreamer, he convinces his best friend Harry to embark on a ridiculous cross-country journey from Providence, Rhode Island, all the way to Aspen, Colorado. Their mission? To return the forgotten suitcase to the woman Lloyd had instantly fallen in love with. What he does not realize, of course, is that the suitcase is not just a random item, it is packed full of cash. This money was meant to pay a ransom to the kidnappers who had abducted Mary Swanson's husband. Without knowing it, Lloyd and Harry are driving through several states with a fortune that dangerous people are desperate to recover. Interestingly, the black suitcase was never originally meant to carry anything of value. In the early stages of writing the film, it was intended to serve a completely different function. The filmmakers envisioned the suitcase as a classic example of what is called a MacGuffin. The term was popularized by filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock and refers to an object, device, or event that drives the plot forward, but is ultimately irrelevant to the story itself. A MacGuffin is not supposed to hold emotional weight or lasting importance. It simply gives the characters a reason to act and sets the story in motion. In the case of Dumb and Dumber, the suitcase could have contained almost anything. It could have been filled with legal documents, a batch of laundry, or even nothing at all. The original intention was that the suitcase would act as a comedic tool, a silly reason for Lloyd and Harry to go on an adventure. The focus was meant to remain on their absurd behavior, misadventures, and cluelessness, not on what the suitcase actually contained. Viewers were never supposed to find out what was inside because in a true MacGuffin scenario, the object itself is beside the point. However, during the screenwriting process, the filmmakers began to reconsider. As funny as the idea was, there was a problem. If the suitcase truly held no weight in the story, would the audience still care? Would viewers still be emotionally invested in the outcome of Lloyd and Harry's journey? It became clear that for a comedy this outrageous to resonate on a deeper level, it needed some real tension. There had to be something at stake. Otherwise, the road trip would feel like a string of disconnected gags with no sense of urgency or danger. So, the creators made a critical change. They filled the suitcase with cash. Suddenly, the plot had an edge. The money brought with it a new layer of suspense, danger, and irony. Now, Lloyd and Harry were unknowingly the targets of dangerous criminals. Their every move, no matter how ridiculous, had consequences. Audiences were not only laughing at the duo's antics, they were also on edge, waiting to see how far they could go without realizing what they were involved in. This decision turned out to be genius. The suitcase was no longer just a plot device. It became a source of tension, irony, and even moral ambiguity. Watching Lloyd and Harry spend the ransom money on ridiculous luxuries like a Lamborghini and a heart-shaped bathtub was funny precisely because the audience knew what was at stake, while the characters remained blissfully ignorant. In the end, the suitcase became more than just a MacGuffin. It became a symbol of the film's entire theme. Two clueless men in over their heads, causing chaos without even knowing it. What started as a simple storytelling device became one of the most memorable elements of the film, and it is one of the key reasons Dumb and Dumber remains such a beloved comedy to this day. Number 6. Jim Carrey wrote part of the script. While Dumb and Dumber was officially written by Peter and Bobby Farrelly along with Bennett Yellen, Jim Carrey also contributed significantly, aside from his improvisational skills. At the time of filming, Carrey was exploding in Hollywood after the success of Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and he brought not just his star power, but also his unique off-the-wall comedic vision to the project. Though he wasn't given official co-writer credit, he was heavily involved in developing his character, and his fingerprints are all over the final product. Many of the film's most quotable lines and absurd gags were either improvised by Carrey on set or developed by him during table reads and rehearsals. For example, the iconic moment in the van when Lloyd lets out that ear-piercing shriek, which he called the most annoying sound in the world, wasn't in the script at all. Carrey fully improvised it during filming. That's just one of many examples of how Carrey's spontaneous comedic genius shaped the tone of the movie. According to the Farrelly brothers in interviews, Carrey contributed entire scene ideas, like how Lloyd imagines pulling Mary Swanson's heart out of her chest, or the Kung Fu dream sequence. Carrey was also instrumental in refining the dialogue. He rewrote lines to make them sound more like Lloyd. This helped create one of the most unique comedic performances of the 90s. Even the subtle things like Lloyd's bowl haircut, which became part of the character's visual identity, were suggested by Carrey. The haircut became as famous as the tuxedos and the scooter. Though Dumb and Dumber had a strong script to start with, it's widely acknowledged that Jim Carrey elevated the material. Number 5. The film was shot out of sequence. Unlike most Hollywood films that try to follow the story's timeline during filming, Dumb and Dumber was shot completely out of sequence. This approach meant that the scenes were not filmed in the same order that they appear in the final movie. Instead, the cast and crew jumped around, filming moments from different points in the story based on what was most practical. The decision to shoot out of sequence was not about creativity, it was about logistics. Factors like location availability, actor schedules, unpredictable weather, and the need to stick to a limited budget all played a role. One of the main reasons for this approach was the number of different locations used in the film. The story follows Lloyd and Harry on a road trip from Providence, Rhode Island to Aspen, Colorado, and along the way they stop in several cities and landmarks. But in reality, the crew could not afford to travel back and forth between these places. It would have been far too expensive and time-consuming. Instead, they decided to group all the scenes set in one region together. For example, all the scenes that took place in Colorado were filmed during the same period, regardless of when they occurred in the movie's storyline. After finishing in Colorado, they moved on to shoot all the Utah scenes. Some scenes were also filmed in Rhode Island. This kind of organization saved money and kept the production on schedule, but it required a great deal of planning behind the scenes. This style of filming introduced a unique challenge: maintaining continuity. Since the actors had to jump between scenes that happened days or even weeks apart in the story, the wardrobe and props departments had to be extremely precise. Harry and Lloyd go through several costume changes throughout the film, from their dog grooming uniforms to their iconic orange and blue tuxedos to ski jackets and winter gear. These outfits had to be tracked carefully. Not only that, but physical changes like injuries, haircuts, and even emotional states had to remain consistent. If Harry had a bloody nose in one scene that came after a fight, the makeup team needed to make sure that same detail was present during any earlier scene filmed afterward, even if it was out of order. To pull this off, the production team used detailed notes, photographs, and wardrobe continuity logs. The costume department had to be meticulous, making sure that every wrinkle, button, or stain appeared exactly as it should. The makeup artists had to recreate bruises or scrapes with accuracy, based on when they appeared in the story. Director Peter Farrelly worked closely with the cast, especially Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels, to ensure that each scene was emotionally accurate, even if it was filmed before or after a related moment. The actors relied on notes, discussions, and constant communication to keep their performances consistent. Filming out of sequence may not be the most glamorous part of making a movie, but in the case of Dumb and Dumber, it was essential. Without this approach, the road trip comedy could not have been made within its modest budget. The result was a hilarious, well-paced film that never gives away the fact that its scenes were stitched together out of order, confirming the hard work and detailed coordination of everyone behind the scenes. Number 4. They used real chili peppers in the death pepper scene. In one of the most disturbing scenes in Dumb and Dumber, Lloyd and Harry prank their nemesis Joe Mentalino by dousing his burger with insanely hot chili peppers known as the infamous death peppers. What many fans don't realize is that the peppers used in that scene were real, and Mike Starr, who played Mentalino, had to endure the full burn of the experience. According to behind-the-scenes sources, the production team initially tried using mild pepper that wouldn't hurt the actors, but the visual reaction just wasn't convincing. So they opted to use an actual hot chili pepper to get a genuine reaction from Starr. It's also worth noting that Starr reportedly had milk and bread on standby between takes as a remedy for the hot chili. Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels, meanwhile, stayed in character and didn't break, even as Starr physically reacted to the spice. Thankfully, no one was seriously harmed in the making of this fiery gag. Number 3. The Mutt Cuts van was real and fully functional. Do you remember the shaggy, floppy-eared, dog-shaped and Mutt Cuts van that Harry and Lloyd drive in Dumb and Dumber? It isn't just a hilarious visual gag, but a real, fully operational vehicle, built specifically for the film and entirely drivable on actual roads. It's the mobile symbol of Harry and Lloyd's absurdity. However, this ridiculous vehicle wasn't just a fiberglass shell slapped on a trailer. It was a modified 1984 Ford Econoline van that had been completely transformed to resemble a furry sheepdog. The dog was depicted with ears that flopped while driving, a tongue hanging out from the front, and a tail that wagged at the back. What makes it even cooler is that the van wasn't just meant for parked scenes. It was legally permitted to be driven on the road and across multiple states during filming. Daniels once described it as the most ridiculous thing he'd ever been inside of, but also one of the most fun. Because the van was a central part of the movie's story, the filmmakers made sure it was safe and durable. Number 2. Lloyd's bowl cut was inspired by Moe from The Three Stooges. Lloyd Christmas's ridiculous bowl haircut has to be the most unforgettable visual trademark in Dumb and Dumber. The look was intentionally styled that way. But what many viewers don't know is that this memorable cut was directly inspired by Moe Howard of The Three Stooges fame. The Three Stooges, who are Moe, Larry, and Curly, were known in the early 1920s for their physical comedy and distinct appearances. Moe, the leader of the trio, was easily recognized by his blunt, straight-across bangs and bowl-shaped haircut, which perfectly matched his bossy and often aggressive behavior. When Dumb and Dumber was in early development, Jim Carrey himself pushed for the haircut. He told the film's hairstylist to cut it as unevenly and as extreme as possible. What's even funnier is that this ridiculous haircut caught on in pop culture. After the movie's release, fans began imitating the bowl cut, especially for Halloween costumes and parodies. To this day, Jim Carrey's bowl cut remains one of the most recognizable comedy hairstyles in movie history. Number 1. A sequel was considered immediately after the original Dumb and Dumber. When Dumb and Dumber hit theaters in December 1994, it became an unexpected box office juggernaut. New Line Cinema was thrilled with the film's financial and cultural impact. There was little doubt the studio wanted to capitalize quickly on the film's momentum. Initial conversations about a sequel began shortly after the film's release. The idea was to bring back Lloyd Christmas and Harry Dunn for another series of outrageous misadventures. But while the studio was enthusiastic, Jim Carrey wasn't. At the time, Carrey's star was skyrocketing. He was in high demand and, understandably, not eager to jump back into the same character too quickly. Jeff Daniels, on the other hand, was open to returning. As the years passed, the desire for a true sequel faded temporarily. However, nearly a decade after the original, New Line released a prequel titled Dumb and Dumberer. It starred younger actors as teenage versions of Lloyd and Harry. The film lacked the charm, originality, and sheer comedic chemistry of Carrey and Daniels, and fans largely rejected it. But the demand for a true sequel never completely died out. Finally, in 2014, the Farrelly brothers reunited with Carrey and Daniels for Dumb and Dumber 2. While it wasn't as critically acclaimed as the original, fans appreciated the reunion and the throwback humor. For many longtime fans, it was a satisfying return. What have you learned from these weird facts about Dumb and Dumber? Share with us in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.